So, good morning, and we need to have a good morning today. Welcome to this session, where we're going to try to answer one of the hardest questions we can ask. Is REDD working on the ground? Does it make a difference? To open this session, we have Leif Jon Fosse, Senior Advisor in the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and the Environment, and part of the NICFI group there. So I welcome you, and you have the floor.
Thank you for that introduction, Aril. I will try to compete with my adversary across the floor here. Hope you can hear me. Tell me if I can't. Right, so I will go straight into the business of today because we don't have a lot of time. Countries and projects in focus here today, and I've just been given this excellent volume of this research, represent a good match and added value to another research effort which we are familiar with, that of CIFOR's global study on REDD, which has followed NICFI almost from the start. And it's interesting to note that Woods Hole Research Institute, CIFOR and NMBU here today, they illustrate slightly different approaches to REDD, from perhaps a detached natural science approach via a more action-oriented approach by CIFOR, which has strongly influenced the REDD agenda, to NMBU, which I suppose one could say is focused on the institutional impact and the institutional process of REDD and poverty impacts. You have the panel debate to take issue with these characterizations, of course. My main and really only point today, because we don't have a lot of time, is the focus which we find in this research effort on projects. Because REDD, as it has been framed from the start, has developed, and from the start, NICFI focused on a national REDD strategy as the most relevant format at which to pilot REDD, at which REDD should be anchored. As you know, there are leakage, reversals, additionality and sustainability concerns with a project approach to REDD. Also, the REDD agenda has moved on, as is particularly well illustrated by the volumes put out by CIFOR following REDD research along the years, moving also from a focus on piloting REDD through what is the setting for REDD, what is the setting for succeeding with REDD. As such, the institutional focus of this research effort is very useful. So, where is the REDD agenda now, as we see it from the Climate and Forest Initiative in the Ministry? Increasingly, it is now focused on commodities, land use and land use planning beyond forests, because the drivers are mostly beyond the forests. It is focused on the role of indigenous peoples and community stewardship over forests and land use. It is very much and increasingly focused on private sector sustainability commitments, very much so after the New York Declaration of 2014. So there's an increasing recognition of the role of the private sector and how they shape land use, and how REDD strategy, REDD efforts needs to be wrapped around that. Also, there's a focus on the economic setting of REDD in green economy perspectives, the new climate economy research effort, Now, I know that moderator Ida Langensen will have his own ideas about how to frame the panel debate later on today, which I unfortunately will not be able to participate in. But let me anyway give you some thoughts to digest or pick up by that time. I won't be here to take issue with any of those. So, but the one point I would like to put out to you then is to try to place the project focus in this wider context, this wider agenda, this wider direction that REDD has moved. Also, I would like to ask you to focus on some of the research needs, the knowledge needs that the Climate and Forest Initiative has noted to the research community. And that is very much following from where REDD and land use is at in the Paris Agreement and in the negotiations here now. And that has very much to do with transparency and accountability in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. There's still a strong focus on monitoring, reporting and verification, improved quality of global and pan-tropical data on deforestation and degradation for forest and land use, including agriculture. And there's a strong focus on improved tools for measuring degradation, including the cost efficiency of those various approaches. And then there's the usual social science focus, which has received strong focus over the years, which will continue to be important. That is to do with non-carbon benefits, impacts on biodiversity, economically so as well, and safeguards, which are conditions for results-based payments. Again, the private sector sustainability commitments will continue to be important. Deforestation-free supply chains will be increasingly a tool for demand-side countries to do their job as part of the picture on deforestation and degradation. And land use planning. All of this is coming together, of course, in the negotiation where the focus from REDD moves into LULUCF. Civil society participation and forest management by indigenous peoples will continue to be important. Gender should receive increasing recognition. And then forest governance, law enforcement, transnational environmental crime, as has been pursued effectively in some countries, Brazil notably so, is going to have increasing focus in a number of countries. So in sum, the focus on projects and piloting is usual. To do that with an institutional approach is very important, but we do underline the need to also take a processual approach and to make sure that the research agenda supports, draws from, and strengthens the agenda of the negotiations. Thank you, and have a good seminar.
Thank you. This is based on the project, what you're going to hear today, and the head of this project has been my colleague and brother in name, Adil Vatten, who will now present it. 15 minutes, and it's also for the project leader.
Thank you. See. Let's get to the... Okay. Welcome all of you. My name is Adil Vatten. Maybe I can stand here when the computer shut down. So it's this, it's always technical issues. I'm gonna take you through some of the information about this project. It's actually back in 2009 when we started. We have been looking, as Leif Fosse said, on many of the institutional aspects of the projects that we are looking at, 7 pilots that I will return to when the slides come up. The point is that we see or look at REDD from the perspective of governance and from the development of new governance structures to try to motivate people to do things differently when it comes to use of or protection of forest resources. Thank you. Please take this one. So, what I said, yes, is that this is very much about changing institutions and also creating potentially new actors to make REDD come about at a local level. We look at the local level, but we think some of the findings that will be presented to you today have relevance to the national and international levels also, because this is kind of linked through the layers of decision making. The 7 pilots that we are looking at, 2 of them are in Brazil, in the Amazon. The APA Rio Negro, APA is the Environmental Protection Area, and the RDS Rio Negro, which is a Sustainable Development Reserve. We have been in the DRC, in Bikoro, and Gemino territories, in the, you say, north and central west of DRC. In Tanzania, we have been in 2 areas, Kilosa and Kondoa, and in Uganda, in Masindi district, in the Ongo forest. And we will try to kind of play out the variations in these different pilot initiatives and the different kinds of experiences that have been learned. This is just a quick little map from the center of the Amazonas, or Amazon, where you see the red area is the APA, which is 650,000 hectares on state-owned land. The same with RDS Rio Negro, is also on state-owned land. It's somewhat smaller, 120,000 hectares, but these are the biggest areas included in the analysis. If we turn to Africa, there are 5 pilots, as I've already talked, and the smallest one is in Masindi. The Ongo forest is about 170 hectares, so that's our contrasts. And in Kilosa and Kondoa, we have about 50,000–60,000 hectares as the size of the pilots. From an institutional perspective, or from the perspective of changing incentives, there are several issues that we will look at. One is clarifying property rights, which means also who has the right for compensation in the sense that REDD is paying. Because REDD is, as it says here, an incentive-based system. It's changing the management plans and creating new bylaws and so on, which also Leif Fosse referred to, and it's to create payment systems. All these things are not just like, do this. It's kind of complex, but it's also different in different countries, what is needed to do, because you're at different stages or there's different institutional cultures and so on. A little bit in the beginning about the research. It has been going on since 2010 in 2 consecutive projects with funding from NORAD and from the Norwegian Research Council. So we have gotten some of this money that the Norwegian government actually have set aside for REDD, but also from the Research Council. We have done research in these pilots on issues concerning what we call governance structures. I mean, the changes in institutions and actor structures. We have looked at the process of establishing REDD, and in that participation and conflicts, etc., and how local people have evaluated REDD. It's also, we try to look at how effective REDD is, concerning how much does it cost to establish such a structure, and also on the impacts of deforestation and on the impacts of livelihoods. So we will try to respond to these questions throughout the day. We have used many different methods. A fundamental thing is all the household surveys we have done. I think about 1,500 people have been interviewed, some of them twice. We have done focus groups, We have done a lot of interviews also with resource persons. We have used GIS data. We use written sources from the local up to the national level in the countries we have studied. I need to emphasize there's a complex story to go into. And it's certainly a lot of uncertainties related to the findings, and it's also uncertainties related to the fact that we have had REDD in these areas for just a few years. So how the long-run trend will be is somewhat of a guess that we can make on the basis of the data we have. The partners, well, it's the Norwegian University of Life Sciences that has led this research, but we have partners in Brazil. That's one of the organizers. The Sustainable Foundation of Amazonas. We have Makerere University, we have Sokoine University in respectively Uganda and Tanzania, and we also have Woodsole Research Center here more as the organizer of the pilots in Congo though. The International Institute of Environment and Development in London was involved in the first 3 years, but in the last period they have not been engaged in the research. And we certainly have been dependent on a lot of other people, the pilot organizers, except the two I have already mentioned, and a lot of people who have offered time to us to be able to get the information we need. We just thank them, we cannot mention all. It would take the whole seminar. There are 5 organizers involved. I've already mentioned FAS. I've also mentioned Woodsole. These are the organizers of the 2 pilots in Brazil and DRC. In Tanzania, the one in Kilosa has been organized by the Tanzanian Forest Conservation Group, which I guess you might know, together with the Community Forest Conservation Network, MUMITA. And in Kondoa, it's the African Wildlife Foundation who has been organizing the pilot, and in Uganda, EcoTrust. I just will give 2 examples of what it looks like. And it has been a nightmare for us to organize all the information we have and try to help you as listeners to this to see the dynamics and understand the differences. I'll just go quickly through 2 examples. The first one is the RDS Rio Negro in Brazil. As I've already emphasized, the forest here is owned by the state, and there has been no change in property rights as part of the project. What has been done is that the FAS has instituted its Bolsa Floresta program, which is as much a development as a forest conservation program. And it's based on private and public funds with quite some long-term commitments. Some of you may know of Bolsa Floresta. It has 4 components, and the components show also this mix of being a development and a forest conservation program. So there is a family component, a payment to the family female head after signing a contract, which loosely described implies a commitment to reduce deforestation. There is also 3 more components. The association component to strengthen the communities, an income component where people or the communities get payments for collective action, so to speak, to create new income opportunities, and the social component for health, school, and so on. So the basis here is an individual agreement. The female head signing a contract saying I should apply by the rules of the RDS and further beyond those rules respect some of the Bolsa Floresta rules concerning reducing deforestation. That releases then money for these other components, and the total amount is about $400 per year per household. Payments are not performance-based, while there are some checks on whether people follow the rules, but there isn't such that you measure carbon here and pay per ton of carbon or anything. There is no need to establish village borders, as I understand, these vast forests, and the property right structure is just continued, it's state property. If I then move to the case of Kilosa, it's a situation that is also such that they are on government land in the sense of something called general land. But general land in Tanzania is a type of regulation or type of system where there is very weak enforcement. So there is a lot of problems related to, you could say it's like an open access system. Well, the communities consider they have customary rights, but in this kind of legal pluralist situation, it's a lot of the rules that actually exist that doesn't function. Here, joining REDD was a collective decision. It was done by villages. They were invited and they could say yes or no. And then in the process, a key thing here was to establish land certificates as a basis for kind of transforming general land into formalized village property. Also developing land use plans with bylaws to follow up on the, or in a sense, support protection of forest and building up of carbon from the REDD perspective. In this case, the money came from Norway. It had a 5-year period, expecting that by 5 years, that means 2014, there will be a global market for trading carbon, where they could then get the income from that market. So what the TFCG has done, and which Professor Kachembe will show, they tried to establish a system to be able to get money from that. And he will talk about how successful that part was. But they did a trial payment at a much lower level than the Bolsa Foresta. And they certainly have mainly focused at the institutional development in this case, but also some kind of development of alternative income. Again, Professor Kajembe will inform. So these are 2 examples of the 7 that we will look at from different perspectives throughout the 2 sessions we have. We aim to take you through the stories, to synthesize the lessons from this piloting. And we hope that we are able to highlight lessons for future policy making, and we kind of direct that towards the final panel in the second half of these side events. So I just invite you. I'm happy to see so many people here. I hope you will learn things, and I hope you will go home and bring the lessons to whoever you represent. So thank you.
So we start now on the individual presentation. We have time constraint, so I show this yellow card, red card, and ultimate green card. Kind of graded sanctions is important in any type of country. So the first, Mr. Kajembe from Sokoine University in Tanzania.
Okay, my name is I'm a former student of Arabic. I just studied in the Netherlands and in the US. My heart is in the natural systems. Okay, I'm going to talk about challenges underlying the process of solving REDD in Tanzania, and I'm going to use 2 cases, Kilosa and Kondoa. And I'd like to start by saying Tanzania, like many developing countries, has been engaged in developing national capacity and the system for reducing emission from deforestation and REDD system 2009. And we got support from a number of organizations, especially NORAD, UN REDD, and others. We had 2 levels. We had the national level implementation, and also we had the local level implementation, or what we call sub-national level. The pilot projects were designed to testing ground for REDD in the country, with the expression that early feed results and lesson would feed and inform the readiness process. And we had 9 pilots spread all over the country and being led by a number of NGOs. The pilot projects had 4 expected outcomes. Firstly, they were expected to build the local readiness. They were also trying to policy testing, supporting broad stakeholder involvement, and delivering REDD results. Introducing REDD in the Kilosa and Kondoa districts. So I'm going to talk about the processes, how REDD was introduced in these two pilots. As an overview, Tanzania Forest Conservation Group in Kilosa was really got to this project before the project was endorsed by the district. So they were proactive. In other words, they got the project before where they are going to implement was not implemented. Furthermore, Tanzania Forest Conservation Group decided to use community-based forest management. In Tanzania, when you talk about PFM, we can talk about community-based and joint forest management. But community-based forest management is whereby the resource is owned by the local community, while JFM is where the resource is raised by the state. And this is a map showing Kilosa and where the piloting was done. So we had to do some changes in the actor structures, and the experience showed that before REDD was introduced in Kilosa, district charcoal makers had the economic power. So these guys used to have a strategic power, these charcoal makers. But as a result of REDD, their power was compromised. And so they have been making a lot of charcoal. However, in the other REDD project, charcoal makers' power was compromised, and they were being seen by as many people by their fellow villagers. Before the introduction of REDD in the district, key organizations existed. So they didn't start from there was the REDD institutions in existence. So really what REDD did was trying to build on the existing institutions. But what REDD did was try to make sure that there was additionality, and one institution which had been added was on so-called community carbon enterprise. So they initiated carbon enterprise, and the idea was to build an organization having the competence to trade carbon credits. So they wanted to have something which they can really try to market that. So there were also changes in institutions. The REDD pilot project in Kilosa was based on CBF, as I said, and TFD made payments to all villagers. This is very important. So we are going to see a difference in Kondoa, whereby payment was not on individuals, but on the village basis. REDD operations in the Kilosa district were based on CBF, as I said, and before REDD, there was no formalized village borders. So what REDD did was to try to formalize village borders. Then after talking about Kilosa, now I would like to turn to Kondoa. The REDD pilot in Kondoa was under AWF, African Wildlife Foundation. And this is where the pilots were being done. Again, just like Kilosa, we had some changes in actor structures. And in the Kondoa district, AWF opted to establish special committees. This is an important thing. In Kilosa, they operate within existing systems, but in Kondoa, they decided to establish a new system, a parallel system. And I'm saying why this approach aimed at increasing efficiency and effectiveness, it was later learned to have been a source of intra-village conflicts. So it caused conflicts. This is because REDD committees were somehow strategic position. In other words, they had the strategic power, they had got economic power, and